Folks, it's Thursday, March 28th, and hopefully you're waking up right now and you're looking forward to baseball because opening day is here. My name is Ethan Smith, your host of the Locked On Pirates podcast. That is Peter Pratt, of course, across the pond, but still our host of the Locked On Marlins podcast. If you live under a rock, you might not know that the Marlins and the Pirates do indeed start their season in Miami at Lone Depot Park in a 4-game series, and me and Peter are here to talk about all of it. Peter, first of all, how are we feeling that baseball is officially back after a long offseason?
Oh, Ethan, you've nailed it. Long off season is the description for Marlins fans in particular. Boy, oh boy, it has been super long. So I'm pumped. I am absolutely pumped. I'm ready for action. I mean, this is going to be a fun series as well. Like, I feel like this is going to be a juicy one to get it going. Like, the Pirates have been, listen, I'm not a Pirates expert, but in spring, they look like they've been a fun team, no doubt, in spring. So I'm interested to see, like, what kind of Pirates team we get. The Marlins pitching's, in a bit of an interesting spot. And so this is going to be a fun matchup. So I'm feeling good. What about you? How are you feeling about it as well?
Feeling all right. I mean, obviously you have the injuries that kind of linger into the regular season. So this rendition of the Pirates, obviously, as I've said throughout the entire offseason, is not going to be the best version that you see of this team maybe in 3 or 4 months with some of the guys that aren't here right now. And as you guys can see on that right side, if you're on YouTube, we are starting talking out about the Pirates and the Marlins off seasons. And I figured we'll start with the Marlins off season. It was an off season that was really dominated by lack of additions and really a lot of subtractions, just from like what I know. Obviously, you have a lot of change in the department of managerial stuff. You have a lot of change in terms of who was running things as far as general managers are concerned. And it just felt weird to me from the outside looking in with this Marlins team that this was a playoff team last year, Peter. I think a lot of people forget that this was a playoff team that played postseason baseball last year. And it just felt like this offseason didn't really get treated as if this team was a postseason team last year. So if you want to elaborate on that a little bit, that'd be great because I really want to know why.
Yeah, I mean, you've kind of summed up the off season, which, considering it only took you like 30 seconds, is probably an indication of what we've been up to, which is strange. To your point, it was the Marlins were the 5 seed as well. It wasn't like they just snuck in. They were the 5 seed, and to effectively do nothing with the major league roster up until relatively late was definitely a surprise, I would say. Most of the activity, as you've kind of highlighted, the domino effect started with Kim Ang, who was the general manager for the Marlins, who was instrumental in many of the trades that the Marlins swung during last season and in advance of the last season as well. Like, Kim really pieced this roster together. She was very much, I would describe it as all-in mode. And Kim then exercised her option basically to not continue with the Marlins. So it was Kim Ang's decision. The Marlins wanted her back. She said no. The reason she said no was they were going to hire a president of baseball operations. So effectively, if you can look at it, Kim's going to get a new boss, maybe. I'm not completely sure on that, by the way. Like, Kim really had her strengths and she needed help. The Marlins, for many years now, have struggled drafting and they've really struggled developing a lot of the offensive guys. And so for Kim Ang, she has her strengths. And she needed help. And I saw this as a bit of a surprising and a bit of a negative impact for the Marlins, really, that they lose Kim. Anyway, Peter Bendix is in, former Ray. The model's going to fit. He's basically going to try and spin up, the Rays 2.0. So that's what we're going to expect. And as soon as that hire was made, all of a sudden, like, everything has turned into the Rays, where you've got no action, minor league free agents. You're scooping up little 1-year deals here and there. You're scooping up bullpen arms that you've never heard of. Like, straight away, it feels like the Rays. And so this is going to be the blueprint now moving forwards. It's going to be like heavy analytics, a lot of new brains inserted into this organization. So listen, you only have to look, a couple of hours north and you realize how successful the Rays have been. And I think from a Marlins fan base perspective, it's about having some patience at this point. However, it's just the timing of this, which I think is weird, or maybe just unfortunate, the timing, because off the back of that postseason run that you mentioned, it feels like a really good time to add to give yourself another chance to get back there, where it feels like actually it's now changeover in the front office and actually new plan. And what we're going to do is basically rebuild the farm is the message, and really do little with the major league roster. And for the Marlins as well this year, I think if they get off to a slow start, by the time you get to kind of midway through the season, then they're going to be pretty active sellers, I think, as well. So, this is a really interesting period for the Marlins. I like the long-term vision, but as a fan base and as a guy that follows this team daily, I would have really liked to have seen them do something in an offseason that, the free agent market, it fully suited the Marlins. Yeah. Not often are there like loads of talent available that are willing to sign on way below market deals for a single year. It's the perfect offseason, perfect free agent market for the Marlins. And all they've got out of it is Tim Anderson, which for me is a little bit surprising. So, yeah, that's the 5-minute summary, I would guess, on the Marlins offseason. Listen, Tim Anderson, for me, is a really nice addition. I'm not knocking that addition. I think it's a really nice upside addition. I think that's, part of the Rays model. Everything's about the upside. Everything's about the upside. And, you're not going to see any multi-year free agent deals anymore. But this offseason, you really didn't need to. And I look at JD Martinez going to the Mets. And for me, that was the most glaring opportunity for the Marlins there. Like, you just plumb in JD Martinez into the DH role, pretty much replacing Jorge Soler, and let the other guys play around it. It was like a perfect fit. So for me, it was a big surprise. I know he's talked openly about it to say that, the Giants were in touch and, he wasn't overly enamored with their ballpark and how that would suit his offensive stats. And so the Marlins have a similar issue to that maybe. But nevertheless, just Tim Anderson this offseason is surprising. And on the pitching side too, and we'll get into this as well, that you got to look at the number of injuries the Marlins are dealing with at this point. And you have to consider, did they need to get more creative and add in a few more kind of veteran guys, pitching wise, just to help cover the innings? It isn't just the guys that are down now, but it's also Sandy Alcantara, which is the ultimate innings eater as well. So, yeah, strange offseason. The Marlins, I would describe them, are in a state of, we're just going to see how it goes. That seems to be the method.
Well, and as a Pirates fan, it's very different from the offseason we've seen, because now you guys introducing a new group of general managers and a new front office. The Pirates have been rolling with the same one now going into year 5. So at some point, I feel like the sentiment around Pittsburgh now is much like it probably was in Miami last year, where it's like, okay, we got to start getting this thing rolling and get to this point. But now from the standpoint of where you guys are, I don't know how it really feels to get there and then not really do anything to stay there. I think that's where a lot of Pirates fans want to see it. Is we've seen them get there. 2013 to 2015 is getting there. They were one of the top teams in baseball, but now you want to start creating that mold where you're staying there. And you look at what the Pirates did this offseason as far as pitching is concerned. Pitching was their biggest concern. Johan Oviedo, Tommy John surgery, out for the year. That immediately made you have to sign more guys. You go out and get Martin Perez, who's a guy that I think was a very sneaky signing by this team. Had a great 2022, got buried in that Rangers rotation last year that won a World Series, so couldn't really do much. Then you bring in Marco Gonzalez for practically nothing, because the Braves, who you probably have so much fun watching your team play against the Braves very often, I'm sure, just really basically said, we don't need this guy. And the Pirates are like, okay, well, there's another pitcher in our rotation. Now you introduce one of your top prospects, Jared Jones. That was one of the biggest topics of spring was Jared Jones going to make this roster? 16 scoreless innings in spring, I guess, said, hey, yeah, I'm going to be on this roster. They're rolling with Bailey Falter for now. You guys more than likely will not see him this first series at all, but you have Paul Skeens down the pipe. You have a lot of other guys like Luis Ortiz, who's going to start in the bullpen, that could come into this rotation. So it's very interesting, though, because you hear about all these injuries and you hear about the offseason additions. And a lot of people would say, well, the Pirates didn't really make that splashy addition, but they added arms, to your point that you made earlier, to just eat innings. Yeah. I mean, I don't think people really understand how many innings there are in a baseball season that need to be covered by starters. And I mean, none of these guys are going to be the sexiest options in the world, but you go out and you get a Rowdy Tellez, who you mentioned is a high upside move potentially with him going back to his 2022 form. You bring in Aroldis Chapman to make this bullpen look really nice. You bring in Eric Lauer and Willie Peralta to just have guys behind your starting rotation. And suddenly you look around and you're saying, okay, the Pirates are actually a pretty deep team almost all over the place except like first base. That's really the one place, and starting pitching, where you look and say, okay, that's not the deepest group, but they have options. And I feel like for Marlins fans, you kind of wanted that, is you wanted to be able to come into the year and say, okay, we have options, even if Sandy Alcantara goes down, or if Yuri Perez isn't looking that great, or Sixto Sanchez doesn't turn into the player that we all expected him to turn into 3 years ago, which I think it's phenomenal, by the way, to throw it back to you, that Sixto Sanchez still has prospect status. It feels like he's been in the league for 5-6 years at this point, and he still has prospect status. I absolutely love it.
Amazing. Yeah, Sixto has been probably the biggest storyline, I would say, this spring for the Marlins. To your point, he still has prospect status, which is wild. The other thing to call out as well, Sixto Sanchez has never pitched for the Marlins in front of fans. He's only ever pitched in the 2020 season, and apart from that, it's been injuries for him. So he's made this roster. He will be in the bullpen. We will see him this opening series. So I'm very intrigued to see Sixto Sanchez. Does it play? Does it play at the big league level again? Because there's been a lot of questions about this guy. Obviously, significantly impacted with injury, like a big prospect, a guy that burst onto the scene in 2020, looked great. Everyone was all over Sixto, like he was big news at that point. Started a playoff game in 2020 against the Bravos. So, it's been a long road back. It's 3.5 years. Is that right? 3.5, 4.5, 4 years. I don't know. 3.5 years pretty much, because it would be in the back end of the year. But man, 3.5 years all the way back for Sixto. So many things that, false dawns, let's say. So for him to get all the way back, I think is incredible. A few people were thinking we're never going to see him again. And equally, when he got to spring, it was like, Skip Schumacher, the manager, spoke about it recently, just saying he didn't expect Sixto Sanchez to make this roster. The expectation was he was probably going to need to be DFA'd because with no options left. So, Sixto is a real name to watch out for. If things go well, who knows what Sixto Sanchez's role could be here? Could he be in leverage in the pen? Could he be sneaking in saves? Could he be needed in the rotation? There's endless possibilities with Sixto. Or could he just get injured and then you never see him the rest of the year? I mean, everything's possible here with Sixto.
Yeah, and it's very interesting, too, because you talked about pitching, which we'll get into here in a moment. We're going to be talking about the pitching matchups that we're expected to see in this series. Very interesting on the Marlins side. Pirates side of things, we're still kind of waiting on some things. But before we do that, let's talk about Prize Picks. Folks, Prize Picks is your spot to do all of your daily fantasy betting this year for Major League Baseball. And you can download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Because for Prize Picks, it's the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and it's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more or less on 2 to 6 stat projections to watch the winnings roll in. You could do this Thursday, today, of course, with the Marlins and the Pirates. Don't have the Prize Pick stuff yet, but sure, it'll be out there featuring some of the top players like Luis Arias and Brian Reynolds. And if you think those guys can just get, maybe more than a hit or maybe more than 2, you're not betting against anything except the numbers. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. And folks, also don't forget that if you love seeing myself and Peter on the Locked On Podcast Network, well, we're probably also on Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And we're back, of course, here, myself, Ethan Smith, and Peter Pratt, all ramped up for opening day. It's going to be very fun at 4:10 Eastern Standard Time in Miami at Lone Depot Park. And we're talking pitching matchups. And the reason opening day to me is always the funnest of any sport any opening day for any sport, is because every team is putting their best starting pitcher on the mound to face off against arguably the best lineup they're going to throw out there, usually depending on matchups. So that's exactly what we're getting here between Pittsburgh and Miami. Pittsburgh, we're going to have Mitch Keller, extension guy, gets the 5-year extension this offseason. Jesus Luzardo, center of a lot of trade talk, but he's still here, still in Miami. It's going to be their top 2 pitchers going at each other. So what can you tell us about Luzardo from Piratesville that we should be on the lookout for from Jesus Luzardo?
Yeah, you're right. The main thing to call out is Luzardo was definitely in the midst of trade conversations the Marlins had this offseason, going back to what I mentioned. And so, listen, Luzardo could be moved at any point as well. Let's assume he's not moved before first pitch today. But, Luzardo, last year when we look at what he did, he had a full body of work. I think that was the main thing. And the Marlins desperately need the same from Luzardo this season with all of the injuries they're dealing with and all of the young guys that are there to plug the gaps. So Luzardo's stuff is top draw. And listen, the funny thing with this Marlins rotation is the way things are lining up here. This 4-game series, it's going to be 4 lefties. Bang, 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 bang. So it's going to be really interesting for any of the left-handed guys, for the Pirates, offensive guys. It's going to be an early big test for those guys. I know one of them in particular that has had a really nice spring too. But from Luzardo, you're just going to expect, the interesting thing about Luzardo as well is, the work he's done with Nick Fortes, the catcher. Those two really combined last year. Fortes caught him all season long, including a playoff game as well on the road against the Phillies. So, Luzardo took a big step up last year. He was obviously acquired from the Starling Marte trade, which ended up being an absolutely stunning trade. The Marlins fixed him. You go and get a guy that was basically, heavily laboring in Oakland and was broken. The Marlins get him in, they sprinkle their dust on him, and next thing is you've got an opening day starter now, 2 seasons on. So, that's the really impressive thing with Luzardo. And for him, the 2 things that changed. A, he put the glasses on, so he could now see, so that probably helps. But secondly, it was all about just going in attack mode. It's what he talks about. I'm in attack mode. And so with Luzardo, you're going to see a guy that's going to be aggressive. And there's going to be plenty of swing and miss in there. It's going to be a lot of fun. Like, he is going to go at it. And he's going to be amped. Like, he probably wouldn't have been expecting to be the opening day starter. But clearly when the Sandy Alcantara news drops, pressure's on. So his first opening day, the question will be, will it be his only opening day for the Marlins? But he's going to be pumped. And I think this is a really interesting matchup as well. What about from Mitch Keller? What are we going to see from him?
Well, very interesting. One of the bigger storylines that we had through the offseason was the extension of Mitch Keller. It was very interesting. He had that 2023 where really it was just a full circle moment for him. He gets to be the opening day starter last year. He gets his first All-Star appearance. Mitch Keller was one of the worst pitchers in Major League Baseball through the first couple of years of his career. Last year, all of a sudden, it just finally all clicks for him. He makes it work. Second half was a little worrisome in terms of some things, but he really only had like one bad month and then fixed it relatively quickly. You're looking at a guy that's going to pound the zone. He's going to work in all of his pitches. He now has that extension, so that's behind him. He knows he's going to be a Pirate for quite a while. And that's what I think is very interesting for a guy like Mitch Keller is really with this rotation, we've been asking all the questions about, okay, what's behind Mitch Keller? But we also have to hope and make sure that Mitch Keller is the Mitch Keller that we just extended from last year and that it doesn't revert back. Now, that's not anything that I'm really truly worried about. I don't think that's anything anybody's really going to have to worry about. But a lot like Luzardo, he's going to attack the zone. He's going to elicit swing and miss. He pitched over 200 innings last year, so he can go deep into games. We know it's opening day, so I don't think he'll go crazily deep into this game. I could see 4 or 5, maybe 6 innings from both of these guys. And then as far as you were mentioning about all the lefties, you guys have lefties going all the way through. We're also going to get to see 2 lefties on our side, Martin Perez and Marco Gonzalez, more than likely. That's going to be really nice to see what those guys can offer you in this rotation. Pirates have basically been the kings of getting soft tossing lefties in free agency and turning them into something the last couple of years. You go to Tyler Anderson, who now got that big contract in in LA not too long ago. You look at Jose Quintana, who's now going to be the opening day starter for the Mets, I believe, because of all the injuries they're dealing with. You look at Rich Hill, who got traded to the Padres. It was a big part of that rotation for a minute after that trade. Now you go to Perez and Gonzalez. But the biggest question is, do those guys stick around, or do you move them on from them eventually? And then you will see Jared Jones in this series as well. Again, Jared Jones, Peter, man, this kid, he has it. Number 62 ranked prospect in baseball, number 3 in the Pirates system, second only behind Paul Skeens in the pitching department in our system. But he has just as much velocity. The command is a little bit of an issue, but I would rather him learn that at the MLB level than like sit him down in AAA again. You're going to be seeing 99 on the gun for a large part of that day when he pitches, and I think that's really fun. But I also like having this whole left-handed pitcher thing. I'm like, if you're a lover of southpaws and left-handed pitchers, this is your series right here, because it appears that 6 of the 8 starters are going to be lefties in this series, with Mitch Keller and Jared Jones being the only ones that are not going to pitch from the left side. So I think that's going to be very interesting. And now that we've talked about pitchers, I think it's time to talk about hitting and who could have a big start to their season for the Marlins and the Pittsburgh Pirates, keeping, of course, in mind that there's a lot of lefties on the mound. That might change our answers a little bit. But before we do that, folks, we're going to talk about Game Time. Speaking of, Game Time is your wonderful place for last-minute tickets. So if you're in the Miami-Dade County area, if you're down there, if you're down in that area, download the Game Time app today and use code FIRSTPITCH for $20 off a minimum of $150 purchase. I will tell you, Miami's opening day tickets are not that expensive, but Game Time is still your place to do everything. Just go get your tickets for whatever you want to do, because you can get it fast, you get them easy, and you can buy tickets to all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you, and with killer last-minute deals. That's why I'm mentioning this to you. If you want to go down to Lone Depot Park, it is the best place to get last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, because Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They have deals on tickets, Peter, right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. And if you find tickets in the same section and row for less at Lone Depot Park, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON for $20 off. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so we've talked offseason, Peter. We've talked the pitching matchups that we will likely see and the pitchers that we will see, but who will be the thorn in the Pirates' rotation and bullpen side coming from the Miami Marlins this week and weekend that we have ahead to open up the season? I already have somebody in my head that I already know is going to probably really make me want to throw like a plush toy at the TV so I don't break my television. But I'll let you go ahead and tell me some of the guys in that Miami Marlins lineup that are going to be not friends of Pirates fans after this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this offense gets going. And, what we've been sold as fans is, well, we're not doing much this offseason because we got a full year of Jake Berger and we got a full year of Josh Bell after those guys were traded for at the deadline. And we've got a healthy Jazz, and Luis Arias is back. Listen, Luis Arias, back-to-back batting champs, both leagues. So, and he's had a great spring, usual Arias spring. Arias is who he is now at this point. He's just a 380, 370 hitter. Like, that's what you're looking for. Jazz came alive towards the back end of spring too. 3 home runs and 3 at-bats at one point as well. So this is a massive year for Jazz Chisholm Jr. He is this offense. Like, Arias is the setup, but Jazz needs to roll. But we know those guys. We know they're the guys to look out for. I'd say for me, what I'm really interested about is, how does Tim Anderson start? He had a 4-for-4 day in the final game of spring for him. So, but for me, what kind of Tim Anderson do you get? If there's anything like what we've seen historically, let's not forget he was a batting champ as well a few years back. So that'd be a huge boost for the Marlins. But another guy, Nick Gordon, acquired via trade, he's a lefty, obviously. So I think like opening day, we're likely to probably see Nick Gordon there. And I think we'll probably see him in left field, maybe. Maybe Brian De La Cruz DHing. We'll see what the lineup looks like. But for me, Nick Gordon, he's had a really interesting spring. He's shown the speed. He's definitely got the power in the stick as well. I think the Marlins like him. I think he's like maybe a sleeper is probably a little bit unfair because I think people know Nick Gordon, but I think he's a guy that to look out for that could really impact it both with the stick, with the glove, and on the bases as well. I think that's been the thing for him. And the Marlins, the run game last year, considering the prior year when the bases, the traditional bases and the traditional rules, John Birdie was running wild. You couldn't stop Birdie. You changed the rules. And next thing is Birdie can't run and no one can run in the Marlins. So all of a sudden, I was thinking, this running game is going to be insane for the Marlins.
Yeah.
It went completely the opposite way. So can they get that going? I think for this type of team that isn't full of power, you've got to manufacture runs. And that includes leveraging these new rules, creating runs. And for me, that's where Nick Gordon comes into this. Birdie, hopefully, see what, whether Vidal Brujan's playing, because again, he's got speed too. So, I described this offense and described it last year. It's the same offense. It's the paper cut offense where they want to get you in an inning. The next thing is you put up 6 hits in a row. And, all of a sudden you look and go, well, man, the Marlins have put 3 on the board. That's kind of what this offense is. And they normally come alive late in the game, like 5th inning onwards. So wouldn't shock me if we see that kind of thing from the Marlins offense. But listen, looking at the spring numbers, they're below par. Looking at last year numbers, below par. They were the worst in the NL. Like, this offense hasn't been good for some time. There's players in there that are, that can be good. There's a lot of question marks here, though, as well. But we'll see. Tell me about the Pirates. What are we going to see from the Pirates? Because I do think this all-lefty matchup, I think, is a really intriguing one for a couple of your guys. And, I know it's going to be hard to handle for one or two. So how are you seeing things playing out in this series?
Well, yeah, and it's interesting having all the lefties is you have O'Neill Cruz and Jack Sawinski, major power threats, both hitting from the left side. So it's very interesting to see what you get from those guys. You obviously have Rowdy Tellez, who I mentioned earlier, big lefty power guy. But it all has, Brian Reynolds, we'll see if he plays in this series, but if he doesn't, I think all eyes have to look at Henry Davis at that point. He's the full-time catcher now with Eddie Rodriguez being out this year, former number 1 overall pick, bats from the right side. You're expecting a lot from him in this series, really in the season, honestly. But in this series specifically, if you're facing 4 lefties batting from the right side, there's going to be a lot to be expected from you. Ke'Bryan Hayes as well. We want to see if that last 2 months of the year last year with the bat was a joke or if it was for real. In spring training, it looked like it was for real. So against lefties, let's see it, Ke'Bryan Hayes. And usually he has some pretty good luck on opening day. One of the first opening day, actually, that I ever covered on the show, he hit a home run in Chicago, and then we don't talk about what happened after that. Injuries are awful, man. But just to name a guy that I think a lot of Marlins fans may actually know, but he's definitely a guy that not universally known yet, I would say. Jared Triolo, I think, has the potential to have a pretty big series here if he's facing 4 lefties. Was expected to be used as a utility man, but played well enough in spring to just flat out win the second base job. A lot of people had questions about that, about Leover Peguero winning that job. It ends up being Jared Triolo, and he had a pretty good season last year. He came onto the scene when Hayes was injured in the middle of the summer, played very good defense at third base, can go to any position in the infield and play defensively if he has to. And I think that's something you might see in this series is you might see him slide over to first base or slide over to shortstop as well, hitting from the right side. And he hit 298 last year. You're looking at a guy that put the bat on the ball pretty well. And a lot of people are expecting a power jump from him. So I think all of my eyes have to be on the right-handed hitters in this series, because if I'm not saying Cruz can't take a lefty deep. He's done it before. I'm not saying Tellez can't do it. I'm not saying Sawinski can't do it. But that I feel like most of the games in this series are going to be won based off how the right-handed hitters perform against this pretty much all lefty lineup of murderers row pitchers that we have for the Miami Marlins in this one.
Yeah. The one guy from the Pirates lineup, like if I was a betting man, and listen, I am a betting man, so I'm probably going to have some money on this. I absolutely love Kutch to have a big series, to be honest with you. I could see Kutch having a multi-home run series. Like, I can just see a situation where he takes both Trevor Rogers and AJ Puck deep at some stage. So my eyes are on Kutch, and I think there could be big series for him, to be honest with you.
If he does do it, you'd be a part of history because he is one home run away from 300. So are you calling his 300th home run happening in this series, Peter?
Nailed
is this
on.
what we're doing?
You're
saying it's happening. All right. So Peter is saying Kutch will hit the 300 mark this weekend against the Miami Marlins. Folks, again, it's opening day. Myself, and I. There you go. Myself and Peter will, of course, be covering the Pirates and the Marlins all throughout the year. Peter, where can everybody find you on all the internets, as I like to call it?
Yeah, for sure. I'm only an X guy or a Twitter guy, depending on what you call that now. So at Miami Marlins _UK for X. I'm basically too old for all the other platforms and don't have the time. So that's where you can find me. And of course, if you want your Marlins content, of course, hit it up on Locked On Marlins. We're there for you every day, of course. So we'll see you there.
Yeah. And much like Locked On Marlins, you can find Locked On Pirates on YouTube and all of your audio platforms because it is free and available to you every single day, just like Locked On Sports Today, 24/7 streaming channel. Make sure you guys go check that out. Again, follow Peter on Twitter at Miami Marlins _UK. You could follow me on Twitter at MVP _Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. For all of your news on the Pirates and Marlins this year, check out Locked On Pirates and Locked On Marlins. Enjoy today's game. And until then, folks, we'll see you on the flip side.